Welcome to the Florida Folk Show podcast. Uh, this is a picture of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the great environmentalist that helped to save the Everglades and was a watchdog of everything in South Florida. She's wearing an Indian dress I had made for her from one of the Seminole women, and she is at her house in Coconut Grove, and I brought that to her, took this picture, but I have it hanging in my house because I always remember and fondly treasure the times I was able to spend with this great person. And I bring all this up to say that I believe that Marian Ryan is the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas of the Green Swamp. And she's led myriad state and local environmental efforts to protect what many call the heart of Florida. 560,000 acres of sacred old Florida landscape lying west of Highway 27, east of Interstate 75, in Polk, Lake, Sumter, Hernando, and Pasco counties. 4 rivers, the Peace, the Withlacoochee, the Ocklawaha, and the Hillsborough, are located here. Marian recently received national recognition from the Sierra Club at a ceremony in San Francisco. The Susan F. Miller Award honors people who have contributed at the local level. Ryan was honored by Sierra Club for her work involving the protection of the Green Swamp and monitoring of environmental effects of phosphate mining in the Bone Valley area of southwest Polk. Now, Bone Valley is a region of central Florida encompassing portions of present-day Hardy, Hillsborough, Manatee, and Polk counties, in which phosphate is mined for use in the production of agricultural fertilizer. Florida currently contains the largest known deposits of phosphate in the United States. Now, Ryan has been involved in the Green Swamp in small ways, such as pushing for signs along roads at the boundaries of the Green Swamp area of critical state concern. She's been involved as well in larger efforts, such as working on committees involved in securing conservation easements for farm property protection or purchase of key pieces of land, improving protection of the Green Swamp and local development regulations, and working with regional business groups to educate them about the Green Swamp's importance to Central Florida's water supplies. And she is a major voice protesting the current push to create new roads through the Green Swamp. Shortcuts so truckers don't have to go through Zephyr Hills as they head for ports on either coast, which we will discuss in detail in this podcast. Regarding phosphate, Ryan was one of the people who pushed for a cumulative impact study, which is finally underway, of the effects of phosphate mining in this area. She has also been involved in making sure there are adequate environmental review of phosphate mine permits. I remember when phosphate spill turned the waters white in the Peace River back in the 70s. But perhaps most important, she has started a Trek 10 Trails program to accomplish a lot of things, persuading people to get outdoors and have fun, and making the outdoors an accessible activity. It introduced people to the variety of parks and trails that are available for use in Polk County, and it promoted Polk County's growing network of parks, whether they're city, county, state, or private. Perhaps more important, the foundation sets up a non-government organization to help improve and support the park system. This is important because it shows there are ways to work to make things better rather than simply sitting back and complaining. I guess that's what makes Ryan's work noteworthy. Instead of sitting on the fringes, she has always made common cause with people from all kinds of groups to help get things done. It also goes to show what a single person can accomplish. That award was well deserved, and I appreciated her taking the time to sit down with us to discuss this current and very little known attack on our Florida natural resources. So without further ado, here's Marian Ryan. Well, hello, Marian. My name is Pete Gallagher.
I'm Tim Valley.
And we are trying to do a podcast for our FloridaFolkShow.com series of podcasts where we feature Florida people, Florida places, Florida things, and with all as much of an environmental bent that we can make in the story. And I've always been fascinated by the green swamp. I never heard growing up. I'm a Florida native, and I never heard of the green swamp until, I was probably in my 20s. I never even heard the mention of it. But then over the years, I've actually been out there, and it looks to me like a little bit of history. We could start off with. It was discovered originally by DeSoto. Is that correct?
My understanding is yes.
And he brought in hogs. He was the one that brought in the feral hog, which is
The bane of our existence.
the main invasive species we have, or one of them. And over the years, I worked for the Seminole Indians for about 20 years, and I know that the green swamp provided protection for the Seminoles during the Second Seminole War. But can you describe the green swamp? Let our viewers know where it is and how big it is.
I have that in my program if you want to see the images.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay.
There we are.
All righty. I was going to focus on the green swamp as a critical component of the Florida Wildlife Corridor. And I hope you can see my cursor because the green swamp is right
Yes.
here in the middle of the state. And this is the official Florida Wildlife Corridor map. And you can see immediately how important it is to wildlife corridors throughout the state. Okay, do you mind starting with the Florida Wildlife Corridor?
No, that's fine.
Okay, I guess you know that the Florida legislature passed the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act this past legislative session. And it was created to provide incentives for conservation and sustainable development while conserving green infrastructure. And they allotted $100 million for the Florida Forever program. And luckily, the Wildlife Corridor Act was provided $300 million from federal stimulus monies, which is a great one-time boost for this. The provisions are to secure access to habitats for wide-ranging wildlife, especially panthers and bears. There's been a number of instances where a bear has tried to come up through Polk County and try to find a place to cross I-4, but was unable to do so when headed back south. And I've been told over time that the green swamp would be a very good place for bears to be reintroduced to establish a population. The Corridor Act also is intending to protect the headwaters of major watersheds and, sustain working farms, forests, and other working lands, and preserving lands and waters to protect coastal estuaries. As you were asking me, the green swamp is 560,000 acres, but it's a combination of cypress swamps, hardwood forest, marshes, pine flatwoods, and sandhills. It's very interesting to fly over it to see the little sandhills popping up in the middle of a cypress strand. It includes portions of Polk, Lake, Sumter, Hernando, and Pasco counties. And a lot of people don't realize that it's the headwaters for the Hillsborough, Withlacoochee, Ocklawaha, and Peace rivers. It's the high point of the Floridan aquifer, which basically acts like a water tower that provides the pressures for rivers, springs, and seeps to have their water supply. And it's a wildlife hub for Central Florida because it connects all parts of Florida through the center of the state with its riverine corridors. So as you can tell, it's going to be essential to the success of the Florida Wildlife Corridor. And here is a graphic image of the entire green swamp area. You see how wide ranging it is across those counties.
If you had flown over the green swamp back in, or the state of Florida back in the 1500s, wouldn't it, most of it have looked like the green swamp? With the sand pine and the forests and the heart of Florida.
An awful lot of cypress logging has gone on, and a lot of land conversion has gone on. So especially in the southern Polk County portion of the Green Swamp, a lot of it has been converted to cattle pastures. So, and there's also been an awful lot of logging. You can see that now looking on Google Earth. You can see the patterns that look almost like a rake went across the land. That's from cypress harvesting. And for people who don't know it, the Green Swamp, portions of the Green Swamp in Polk and Lake counties were designated an area of critical state concern in 1974 because of uncontrolled development. And the reason it was just Polk and Lake is because that's where most of the development was occurring, because the remainder of the swamp is basically the Withlacoochee State Forest, which was already protected. And here's the Ecological Greenways Network map. And this map shows that the unprotected areas that are very much of interest to conservationists are those areas that are shown in green. The gray area here is the area of the Green Swamp that is already protected. So you can see that there's work that needs to be done for the Florida Wildlife Corridor to be firmed up and become the functional corridor that it needs to be.
What's the difference between a state area of critical concern and a federal area of critical concern?
The state area of critical concern is just mandated by the state legislature. And like I said, it was established to protect the natural resources of the swamp because of uncontrolled development. You know that Florida has never been a shining star as far as growth management goes.
Yes.
And that's especially true of Polk and Lake counties. This is a closer view of the Green Swamp. And you can see it's also an important connection to the Peace River. This is Lake Hancock right here. And there's a significant amount of conservation lands along the Peace River. There's the coastal petroleum settlement lands. And this is Circle B Bar Reserve, and the Water Management District owns literally the entire eastern side of Lake Hancock. And above that, you've got Saddle Creek belongs to the county. You've got Tin Rock fish management area. And you have a few gaps in there, but it's important to know that DOT is actually working on several different wildlife underpasses across I-4, because that was one of the biggest conservation tragedies of the 60s, was the construction of I-4, which basically severed this section of the Green Swamp apart from the rest of it. Because right now there's literally only one, quote, crossing, and that's an old cattle crossing in Polk County.
Now, all of the lands not already protected, are those all owned by private entities, or are they like
Yes.
agricultural land? Or are they...
Yes, pretty much private property. And all of the land buying programs in the state of Florida are willing seller only.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why it's been important that Florida has embraced, to a great extent, less than fee acquisitions and conserving the land through conservation easements instead of a fee simple purchase.
I'm still concerned about the protection of the swamp. What does that mean, critical area of concern? Because I know the critical area of concern federally is very, very lockstep. You can't do anything in those areas. But the state area concern, is it that strong?
I would say no, because Polk and Lake counties negotiated separately with the Department of Community Affairs over their comprehensive plans. And so there are slight differences between the two, but by and large, it has significantly greater protections than a lot of other lands in the state as far as any development capabilities.
So what is the federal government's interest in this?
I'm not aware of any, actually.
Well, you know, there's been the big debate about and this has been going on for 30, 40 years about designating an area of critical concern for the Florida panther. And
they haven't done it.
And they haven't done it.
Yeah, which is insane.
And so I'm thinking that's the solution to a lot of the problems that we're facing in the Green Swamp and also down in Big Cypress and those other places. And I guess
the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has refused to identify any critical habitat for the panther.
Right. Even though you can look on the Panther website and it's got the GPS dots of every single panther that they've ever tracked over the years, and it's very easy to see where that critical habitat is. It's almost like one big blob of dots that connect totally. And
right, and Collier County has been very busy getting development approvals for that land.
Well, what programs are going on right now besides the Wildlife Corridor program, which has had a lot of good publicity through Carlton Ward and some of his projects? But what other projects? Is there somebody out there that saved the Green Swamp? Is there something like that? Some organization?
Well, I worked with a number of other volunteers in the early 90s just to get it listed on the Preservation 2000 list, because it originally wasn't on that acquisition list at all. And so it ended up being on the list, and now I believe it's 4 different projects in the Green Swamp under the Florida Forever program. And so as they have money and willing sellers, they are acquiring additional lands, and the Water Management District and DEP and the Green Swamp Land Authority that I was on during its existence purchased a significant number of land protection agreements. And so there's something like 56,000 acres of land in the Green Swamp that is protected by conservation easements, which were all less than fee protections. But the Florida Forever program is still active. The Rural and Family Lands Protection Program is still active. Unfortunately, it has not been funded until very recently. Florida Forever should have had a lot of funding based on the passage of Amendment 1 a few years ago, but as you know, the Florida legislature decided they were going to spend the money instead of putting it towards land acquisition.
Now, the $300 million for the Florida Wildlife Corridor, is that just specifically for purchasing land, or is it also like restoration and other activities along those lines, or invasive species removal, things like that, or is it purely just land acquisition?
I think the focus is on land acquisition, because $300 million across the state of Florida is not going to go very far.
No.
Especially in today's prices.
Who are our friends up in the legislature?
That's a very good question.
Who are our friends in Washington? Rick Scott, Marco Rubio, those are the senators. A lot can be done by them taking it up.
You're right.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
This is just basically going over what conservation lands exist there now. I mean, approximately half of it is owned by government entities outright. And we've got Colt Creek State Park and Lake Louisa State Park. We have the with Coochie State Forest. And like I said, all these other entities are conservation easements and land protection agreements, which I said total around 56,000 acres. So a lot has been done in the Green Swamp. There's more that needs to be done, but it's critical that we get the connections to the swamp.
What do you mean by that?
The gaps in the riverine
Oh, okay.
connections in particular. And if you watch any of the Florida Wildlife Corridor programs, you know that one of the hardest ones is going to be going over the ridge from Lake Reedy into the Green Swamp across US 27. That's going to be one of the toughest ones. Because that's all high and dry, highly developable property that's very expensive.
And what is that intersection near? Is there a big city near that, or
It's just wall-to-wall development up US 27 from Polk County through South Lake County.
residential development?
Yep.
Yeah.
What used to be all orange groves is now all rooftops.
Yeah.
That's where the connection is.
So it's still tough. Yeah, there should be a connection made into Lake Louisa State Park or into the portions of the Hilochi Wildlife Management Area lands. That's what's on the west side. So we need to jump from the east side in the Reedy Creek area.
Who wants to live in those subdivisions?
Apparently a lot of people.
I'd just like to know what the profile is of the person that would live there. I'm a native Floridian. I'm not going to live in a gated community or whatever those things are that are going up. I don't understand it. And but if you build it, they will come, you know.
They darn sure will, because they're filling them up as fast as they build them. I guess everyone is escaping snow. They won't be escaping that for much longer, though, will they?
No, no. Well, if it was a perfect world, what would you recommend happen immediately to save this swamp in particular? If we had the right kind of governor and the right kind of senators, I think we have the right president in there now that would approve of this. But what would be the perfect world for you regarding the Green Swamp?
The perfect scenario for me would be for Congress to fully fund the land and water conservation program. I think that's $900 million a year that comes from oil fees. I can't remember the exact terminology.
Royalties.
Yeah, the royalties from oil. So that'd be $900 million a year for the United States. The Florida legislature could, see the light and fully fund what Amendment 1 was asking, and that would be around $900 million a year. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service could designate critical habitat for wide-ranging animals like the panther or even the bear.
Reintroduce the regulation.
And, Florida could actually get real and initiate real growth management regulations again. Go back to a Department of Community Affairs instead of a Department of Economic Opportunity. I mean, that tells you a lot right there.
Did you ever have any connection with Larry Harris?
Yes.
Because I, regarding bears, he wrote a paper. In fact, I went up there and stayed at his house for a week or so, 2 weeks. And we told the story. I helped him write it. We told the story of a bear from way down south in Big Cypress that somehow made it all the way up to Lakeland and areas like that. Before there were, this was a bear from south of Tamiami Trail, I believe. But somehow made it up there, and they had they tracked the bear. One day it was right there outside of a family reunion, just over in the bushes, looking at them all. So, big black bear, and the ways that it went helped Larry figure out. And I think he's one of the first people to come up with the word wildlife corridor, the term, and that was a long time ago. The next time I heard anything about the wildlife corridors when Carlton Ward started out with his, because his thing had a lot of publicity. Had a TV show and had, it was in many magazines and newspapers. What do you think media wise that we could do today to get the grassroots support?
I think we have grassroots support. The problem is we don't have agency support. And one of the things you wanted me to talk about was this SR 56 extension.
Right.
And I mean, one of the biggest violators of, habitat fragmentation is DOT. Everybody, no one wants to wait in traffic. Everybody wants to have, the ability to go from point A to point B the fastest way humanly possible. And as we all know, you cannot build your way out of congestion, but yet they keep trying.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, so many studies have shown, like, when you build more roads, it just leads to more sprawl, more development, and it's a never-ending vicious cycle, it seems.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that's, so bad about 3 of the current transportation projects that are on people's wish lists, is that it's going to end up fragmenting the green swamp as it is and eventually end up to more development. And, the SR 56 extension is one that will really cook your goose when you see what the alternative routes are. Yes, it just blows my mind that, one of the purposes of this basically was to create a bypass around the city of Zephyr Hills into Polk County. I mean, that doesn't even make any sense to me.
Yeah. No, apparently people don't like driving indirectly through Zephyr Hills and then back down or whatever they have to currently do now. But it just makes no sense going through some like vital like nature like that, and just to have people save a little bit of time on their drive.
Yeah, how many minutes are they actually going to save? How many times have you had some guy pass you on the road doing 90 miles an hour and y'all are at the same traffic light 5 minutes down the road?
Right.
This is going to blow your mind. All right, here is the SR 56 set of alternative routes. How do you like the bottom 2? The bottom 2 create 15 additional miles through conservation lands.
Why not put these roads up on stilts, like a bridge all the way across, like they didn't do in Louisiana? When you go in there on Interstate 10, or like they did in certain, or use wildlife underpasses, which has been so successful with the Florida panther.
Well, they shouldn't be breaking new ground through a conservation easement or a preserve. I mean, because
no, I agree. But if it comes down to it, what excuse would they make to be laying flat road and putting up walls and making an interstate or whatever they're going to make through there? Put it up on a bridge. Is it too expensive? Is that the problem?
Yeah. It's too expensive to make wildlife underpasses and overpasses.
Right.
According to a lot of people.
So don't you wait till you get the money?
Well, as you can imagine, option number 1 here, using existing roadway corridors, is our preferred corridor.
Right.
Not these 2 down here. So, and they were going to have a public meeting on this issue. Was it in
few
June?
weeks
I think it was in June. And at the last minute, it was called off and it hasn't been rescheduled.
Yeah, do you know why it was called off? I wasn't able to get a clear answer from them when I was trying to
I
inquire.
think it's because Hillsborough County rained hellfire on them about it.
There you go.
Because I think their Parks and Rec, well, it wasn't Parks and Rec, who was it?
Yeah, no, in an
I know
email.
there were a
from
number
them-
of letters written by officials with Hillsborough County giving them hell about it.
Yeah, the only somewhat ambiguous answer I got back from them was that the meeting is going to be rescheduled for sometime in the early fall, whenever
Right.
that happens to be. But yeah, and so obviously because they postponed the meeting, that means the public comment period has been extended. So people can still definitely write letters, send emails, make phone calls, speak up about this, and push for alternative one there.
Right. But I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you've looked at the initial information sheets about this road project, you don't see these conservation lands. What you see is, a proposed corridor that's just a swath of yellow
Mhm.
over nothing. You can't tell that all these conservation lands are there.
Yeah, it always seemed weird to me that they don't include what the actual nature is that they're cutting through on their maps, their proposals.
That's
It's-
done by design.
Yeah, yeah, because people would have to see that and be like, no.
Isn't this the middle of nowhere? I mean, this is the middle of nowhere, Florida, right? Just look
Correct.
right here. So what's the big deal of who is it that wants to go around it? A tourist going from one side of the state to the other? Why is it this is such a priority?
It's to get around Zephyr Hills traffic.
That's seriously all it is. Because apparently you have to take a circuitous route through Zephyr Hills to get over to Polk, but yeah, I don't know. How many people could possibly be inconvenienced by that on a daily basis? I mean, really, how many people are having to deal with that we need to destroy this?
Well, whoever the legislator is for these areas,
Yeah.
that's a couple of them. Well,
Man.
this is crazy. Absolutely.
Yeah,
What
this
is
is
it?
some of the things that have been going on. I mean, Hillsborough County and the Water Management District both should be, just incredibly upset about this because they've spent, as they said, decades piecing together the wildlife corridor that connects all of that land heading towards the Green Swamp. So, and it would, using those two alternative corridors on the south end, it would obviously fragment and degrade the habitat and interfere with hydrologic restoration projects and prescribed fire. So totally the pits.
Yeah, and then so they would have to if they do go through there's a lot of wetland mitigation that they would have to do through the mitigation banks, which as we've come to discover over time aren't at all what they are cracked up to be, it seems. Most of them don't actually serve for replacing what was lost.
Exactly. And I mean, if you're like in Polk County, in some areas of Polk County, there's not even a mitigation bank to go to. So the mitigation is actually occurring out of the watershed,
That's just crazy.
or out of the basin anyway. So that's really detrimental.
What about the USF Forest Preserve?
I wanted to bring that up because it is a little key piece of a wildlife corridor attaching to the Hillsborough River over to the Green Swamp. And if you've read anything about it in the papers, just out of the blue, USF decided to solicit a request for information from the development industry
They
for,
didn't even announce it to anyone. It just like appeared in a biz journal, like
Yeah.
notice or something
Yeah.
like that, and totally blindsided the faculty, the students. Like that was just, I don't know. But it seems like the USF administration has had a lot of crazy turnover since then of a lot of the key players that were really pushing for that. So hopefully that's a good sign for keeping that preserved.
What business is it of a university or a county commission to ruin land? Why is that in their or to make a request for somebody to come in to ruin land? Instead of seeing the beauty and the history and the treasure that land is, to bring students out there to
which they currently do at the Forest Preserve.
Yeah.
They've been using it as a living campus, and so that's what's even more bizarre about
if
that
this
one.
was Pulte Homes or one of these developers, I could understand it. That's what they do. The University of South Florida is not a salesman of endangered land.
and this property is listed on the Florida Natural Areas Inventory as a conservation area.
Yeah, I mean, it has preserved in the name. Everyone just assumed it's preserved.
Yeah, one would assume.
Yeah.
Well, when somebody told the president of the University of South Florida, hey, it's on the Florida native area map, instead of saying, oh, well, never mind, we can't touch it. Hey, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We can get around that. You see what I'm saying? It really irritates this native Floridian.
Well, when I went to FNA to look at it, I assumed that it had a conservation easement on it, but apparently it does not. I mean, it was being used for conservation purposes, but it does not have a legal conservation easement on it. So at a bare minimum, that needs to happen. If not, the ELAP program purchasing it outright. If USF won't do the right thing and just leave it alone.
Yeah, it's so crazy. A lot of the times with these fights, it is against like a developer trying to secure some private land, like to connect the corridor and stuff. But this is already owned by the state. Like there shouldn't be a fight here. The state already owns it. It should be a sealed deal. It's very frustrating.
Very.
We had a man on the radio last week who is trying to save the Lostermann Forest up there in just south of Tarpon Springs, and it's owned by the Pinellas County Commission.
No, the school board.
I mean, school board, who have are taking bids from developers.
But
Is that what a school board does?
Yeah, it's
Well,
their
that's what-
excuse was they needed funding and they can't go to the legislature and be like, hey, we need funding. The state legislature will be like, well, you've got this excess land you're not using, so you should be selling it off, which is just terrible logic.
Well, I know that the University of Central Florida has a long history of, not conserving the land that they alleged they were going to. So that's unfortunate. Anyway, I wanted to show you a map of the forest reserve. See the little green shape down here?
Yeah.
That's the USF Forest Preserve. And you can see that's key little link in between Cypress Creek Flood Detention Area, the Nature Preserve, and then into the Lower Hillsborough Wilderness Preserve, all the way up into the Green Swamp.
What river is that? Hillsborough?
Hillsborough, which is an outstanding Florida water. So you know that this property helps filter all of the water that comes through this system.
Is there development in there? I'm not really good at, like in the middle there between the flood detention area and the preserve?
All the brown areas or any of that, is any of that developed?
I know that some of it is. I mean, this is right on Fletcher Avenue.
Yeah, like that's all.
It's right adjacent to Lettuce Lake Park.
Yeah.
And how far away is the campus from that?
It's just a short little drive.
Literally up the road.
Yeah, I used to go. I had a friend who worked at the Parks and Rec department at USF or whatever, so we used to go out onto that forest preserve, like just at the little area that the students were allowed to go in. They had like free canoe rentals for students and such, but No, it's just it's a really beautiful, amazing piece of land that they have there, and really hope it gets preserved. Continues to be preserved.
Why don't we put in a gated community that the students aren't allowed to go in to see it?
Was it? Oh.
Okay, this is just, a summary of what the issue is. It's got 20 plus state or federally listed species on it, and it also has sandhill uplands, which the students have been, studying, and I think they practice prescribed fire on them. And I mean, it's really a valuable piece of property, not only for conservation, but for education.
Yeah, I know they were doing prescribed fires, but they've been having a hard time getting permitting for it because it's so close to residential areas and whatnot.
Right.
So, and USF doesn't actually have a prescribed fire program, so they would need to collaborate with like another university or entity to do that. I wish I could remember the PhD candidate's name who's been spearheading the Save USF Forest Preserve, but she was saying in a meeting with the Native Plant Society a few weeks back that they haven't been able to do the prescribed burns, but that is definitely something that they would like to be able to do because it's super critical, and it's also a great opportunity for the students to learn about that,
Is that Jeannie Munger?
Yeah, I think that's her name. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a Facebook page. And
Yeah, and they have a website as well. I think it's saveusfforest.com, I believe.
okay, this is just another outline of it. Yeah, I see it. Outstanding Florida water. Okay, this is Imperial Polk County. All right, this is one of some Polk County staffers' dream of the future. And this basically all came about because truckers, since Dean Still Road through the Green Swamp has been paved, now they're using it as a shortcut instead of running up to I-4. And as you know, the I-4 Ultimate is in the process of being constructed, and we're probably 4 or 5 years away from that in Polk County. But just because they can, they really would like to see Dean Still Road paved and have the curves taken out of it and the low spots that flood taken out of it. And what they want to do is go from Highway 27 straight shot all the way across to Highway 98. That would mean going through conservation lands, which include the Water Management District's Hampton Tract and the Colt Creek State Park.
Instead of going south to Interstate 4 and across and up to 27,
Correct.
wherever they're going. Yeah.
And so, where is my list? Yes, this is a classic example of how old road projects never die. This was originally 50 years ago. Now, DOT was proposing to extend Highway 54 across the Green Swamp over to the Gulf Coast, but it got sidetracked because of the Four Rivers Basin project that was proposed to protect Tampa from future flooding. But luckily, Four Rivers was scrapped and all the land was conserved. That was the beginning of real land conservation there. Okay, so currently, Polk County staffers put forth this dreamscape to the county commission during one of their retreats to run Rock Ridge Road, run Dean Still across the Green Swamp to Rock Ridge Road and actually straighten that out because it's got a bunch of kinks in it, and have it meet up at 98 and the intersection of 98 and like 471. So it could just be dream transportation in place.
Like an East-West 301.
Yeah, our transportation planning organization is currently trying to, they're the camel trying to get their nose under the tent by proposing this project here, which would just be taking the road improvement from 27 to Old Grade Road and then improving Old Grade Road down here. This is the Osprey unit of the Hiloshi Wildlife Management Area. So you can see the future. If they do this, how hard is it going to be for them to do this?
Yeah. But the roads heading south, like Old Glades Road, who is going to benefit from that?
Nobody.
Why do they want to do it?
Nobody. We're truckers.
That's what I'm saying. That's what, a lot of these are just for truckers.
Truckers. Exactly. Yes, we have the CSX multimodal whatever in Polk County, and truckers are it.
And so they have that powerful of a lobby to push this thing through?
Well, they've got some pretty heavy influence because there's several roads that are new or in the works that have been justified by freight traffic. And if freight traffic isn't enough, they throw in hurricane evacuation. You know how that is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I went before the Transportation Planning Organization, and so did the chairman of the Sierra group that's local, and asked the TPO to remove the proposal from consideration. And of course, as far as I know, we were totally ignored. And so we're going to take our fight to the county commission, apparently. That's the next step. But the Green Swamp Task Force, which met during the Polk and Lake counties fights over the comprehensive planning process, the task force in Polk County came up with a, like a 3-inch thick report that recommended that the design and construction of any roads, the existing roads through the Green Swamp, when they were improved, they should have underpasses for wildlife crossings, especially in the core area, which is basically where the large cypress strands run north and south across I-4. I mean, you can see those really easily just looking on Google Earth. So, yeah, see, truckers are currently using Dean Still as an alternate to I-4. But FDOT actually is implementing a couple of wildlife crossing projects in Polk County across I-4, and we are really looking forward to them actually happening. We've only been trying to get this done since 1992.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we thought we were going to get it with the high-speed rail because that was one of the conditions of the high-speed rail agreement, but then we had a certain governor who threw that out the window.
Biggest mistake I can ever imagine. So these are underpasses when they say wildlife crossings. Yes.
Yes. And there's actually going to be one that's proposed for the Highway 33 area that would cross I-4 around where Gator Creek is. And that is actually planned to be an overpass. But of course, it doesn't have any funding yet. So we'll see what happens.
Have you had any contact with the Seminole Indians that own have a brand new reservation out there?
No.
Because they have, they have environmental concerns too. Some of the stuff they're out there north of County Line Road, Old Polk City Road, way up in there. They've got several thousand acres. It was made a federal trust reservation a couple years back, and they're building a small community out there for the
Right.
What were previously the Tampa Seminoles, and they're going to move from Tampa to that land out there where they can live more wilderness than being next to the big hard rock, So I don't know. It might be worth it to see what they think about it.
I will definitely check into that. Yes, the last thing I've got for you is the US 98 widening, because DOT has begun a PD&E study on 98 in Polk County. And one of the problem spots truly is where it goes from 4 lanes out of North Lakeland to 2 lanes heading towards Lake County. So the proposal is to 4-lane it. And here is their proposal. But the stated need is all about traffic capacity and, you know, creating bicycle and pedestrian facilities and all this kind of stuff, safety for all roadway users except critters. There's nothing in this at all about providing for connectivity for wildlife between the Green Swamp and the Upper Hillsborough Preserve lands. And I have written DOT a couple of times already and asked them about it, and all I've gotten back is deadly silence.
Jeez. Yet there must be a tremendous amount of migration between the Green Swamp and the Upper Hillsborough Preserve.
There has to be, because I mean, years ago when we did a wildlife survey on I-4 to justify our request for wildlife underpasses at I-4, there was an astonishing amount of roadkill then, and that was 30 years after I-4 had been built. But I mean, I used to basically live on I-4 for my work, and man, I just saw an unbelievable amount of road pizza.
Yeah.
So
When
imagine
was
98.
When was I-4 built?
1960?
60. Wow, that's way before all the Endangered Species Acts and all,
Yeah.
everything.
Yep. Right before the mouse. The mouse that ate Florida.
Yeah.
So,
Isn't that Valerie Wisecracker's song? The mouse that ate
I
Florida.
think she calls it a rat.
The rat. She calls
Yeah.
it a rat. Yeah.
rat that ate Florida. But you can see how much wild land there is here between these two. I mean, it's not like it's developed much. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity here to obtain land for wildlife crossings if they will just do it. But the Wildlife Corridor Act only instructs DEP. They don't instruct DOT. So that's where we are.
That's a very strange thing. It's roads are the problem. That's DOT.
Yeah.
Yes, roads are the problem. Yep, not a peep about wildlife crossing components, you know, and the wildlife corridor, the Florida Wildlife Corridor recognizes the swamp as a critical hub for wildlife habitat and, you know, its connectivity through its riverine corridors. And, you know, without keeping it intact, we're in kind of trouble. So, especially with climate change.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, what is climate change going to do to all this?
All I know is it's going to raise the Peace River quite a bit and increase its salinity.
What's going to happen to the Cypress Lakes 55 plus community?
It'll get wetter.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's not on the beach doesn't, on the coast, doesn't mean that it won't get flooded.
Yeah, I mean, we've been having torrential rains here the last couple of years, you know, that are indicative of the climate change. And I mean, it's just astonishing to get, you know, 3 inches of rain in an hour, which has happened a couple of times. Okay, so anyway, I had a number of sources here, and that's the wrong bloody map. I have another one that has more resources on it that I will have to share with you.
Oh, yeah, you can send them to us and we could add that to
Yeah,
it.
we can add the links to the video description.
Okay.
Do you know of any really well done films of the Green Swamp, documentaries or films or just footage?
No, I don't. I mean, all the footage and stuff that I knew of took place during the Green Swamp Task Force, which was like 1992, 93. The consultant for the project did helicopter rides over the swamp. And let me see. I can't even say there was very much of that when the Green Swamp Land Authority was operating from 95 to 99. I mean, nah.
I can't believe that the DOT, the DEP, and some of these public agencies have not sent drones up to look at all this stuff.
We have, but we don't know.
Yeah, they may have, but
Which would be public record. And it'd be interesting to show the people, this is what the DEP is looking at with their drone. And this is what they're deciding to do. You know, just to make the dramatic change that it's going to take to that habitat.
well, it's pretty easy to see what's out there just by going on Google Earth.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
So, but you know, you can also look at all the conservation lands on the FNA website. I included the link for the petition to say no to the Forest Preserve. I think they're approaching 30,000 signatures on their petitions.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. But, you know, we really need to keep an eye on this SR 56 and this US 98 project in particular.
Yeah, there's just always so many different moving targets. It's a never-ending fight to try to keep this stuff preserved and protected.
Yep.
Well, like I was saying today earlier, as people get younger, I mean, not younger, but as young people get into positions of power, it's the young people that are going to suffer more than I'm going to suffer with all this, and look back and say, why didn't you do something? Some of those young people are in positions right now. Things are changing. Just like I made the example of the city of St. Pete. It was a dead city. And finally, the old guard got taken down, you know. And one of these days, we're going to have young people as senators and congressmen, younger people that are going to do the right thing with the courage, you know. Perhaps Governor or Congressman Christ will be the next governor, you know. Somebody that's very environmentally attuned to things like Bob Graham was before that. That's it, you know, we have to let young people know what this is all about. Somehow bring it to them. This is their world that we're messing up. Well, I didn't know if you had any final words to say, Marian.
No, not really, other than, you know, just everyone needs to support land acquisition and ride herd on FDOT and their road projects. And if you can't show up in person to those hearings, you can always submit comments electronically or by snail mail. And it's important that you do that, because I mean, it was public participation that nailed the coffin shut on the MCORS roads, especially the one that was going to go from Collier County up to Polk County. That was another one of those roads that would never die. That was originally the Heartland Parkway.
Yeah, yeah. In the heart of the Florida panther habitat.
Exactly.
Well, we thank you for taking the time here and for all the great work you've done over the years. I didn't mention Fish Eating Creek, but after this is closed, I'll mention it. Well, thank you very much. I guess
You're
we'll
welcome.
sign off and stay in touch with us.
I shall, and I will send you my resource list that's modified, has more contact stuff on it.
Awesome.
And put us on your mailing list or call list if you need something from the media.
Okie dokie, I sure will.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you.